Welcome to the Treasury Update podcast, presented by Strategic Treasurer, your source for interesting Treasury news, analysis, and insights in your car, at the gym, or wherever you decide to tune in.
Welcome to the Treasury Update podcast. This is Paul Galloway. I'm joined here by Craig Jeffery, Managing Partner and Founder of Strategic Treasurer, live at the AFP 2022. Craig, I'd like to talk today about a few things that we've noticed or seen here at AFP, and I'd like to start out with trends. What is the biggest theme that you're seeing at this year's AFP?
We're in this room that we've rented from AFP, where we've been hosting a number of events. We're looking out over the exhibit hall and area where they serve lunch, and it's really good to be back. I think the biggest theme, I think, is one of energy. People are excited to see one another, to learn, and to be back together. That's encouraging in a lot of ways. I think last year's conference it met the needs, but it was much smaller than we've normally seen. And so this is at least 3/4 of the way back from there to probably the peak of the AFP. The pre-registrations surpassed final registrations. This year's pre-registrations surpassed final registration. I know we're north of 5,000. I don't know if we've hit 5,500 or not, but that provides a significant amount of energy. Some of the themes that we've heard a lot in our discussions have to do with a broader process view, end to end, in addition to discussions about risk, discussions about payments and technology. The end-to-end view, whether it's about payments or risk or structure or services, how do we make sure that processes, methodologies are structured properly? So that end-to-end view is one. The other has to do with making sure we're setting up our technology to handle changes in infrastructure at companies, to handle changes in what's coming down the road, what's available now and what's coming down the road, to make sure we're not creating situations where our technology becomes obsolete. That's what we're hearing from treasurers, assistant treasurers, directors. People are finding things out. They want to make sure that they're positioned well. So excitement, end-to-end view, and technology architecture. And there's a lot of learning going on, which is always ideal for an educational conference like this one.
Yeah, no doubt, Craig. I can definitely tell you I've seen some of the same things, especially around the excitement here. People are engaging people in ways that they haven't in some time, and so that's really encouraging. The numbers are definitely up. So in terms of AFP itself, are they doing a good job in delivering relevant content to its members?
Yeah, I think I'll address that from the conference perspective. The discussions around content, this is what we hear. It's like there was 2 or 3 sessions I really wanted to go to, but I could only go to one. And it's that type of situation is there's an abundance of really good content. There's just a time limitation. That's much better than I didn't see anything the last 2 sessions. I'm only going there for recertification credits. The idea of, people are recertifying if they're CTPs. They're gaining new knowledge and experience. That's quite good. I think they're doing a really good job. I think they've dug in. COVID's really difficult for the travel industry and events, a firm, an organization like AFP to make it through those type of items. Everyone's been challenged. I think they've done a really good job, particularly this year, making it through that. And it seems like they're back. They're strong. I think they're doing a good job. And I think that has to change over time. So that's everyone's challenge to see how that works. We love this event and forum. We schedule a lot of events before and after to provide even different methods of sharing content and leveraging the community here. So it's great. So hats off to Jim Cates and the rest of the crew for doing this.
Yeah, no doubt, Craig. I think what I've seen in the AFP over this past couple of years is people historically have been, hey, I'm going to recertify. I'm going to get my CPs. I'm going to cover all my bases, whether it's CTP, CPA, FP&A, whatever it is, the certification that you're looking for. They're not talking about that anymore. They're going, man, I've got 1, 2, 3, 4 different things I want to go see. They're all at the same time. I can't see them all at once. I got to pick one. And I also get a win for the accreditation as well. So it's like a win-win. Delivering that kind of content, I think, is really important.
Yeah, and it's the formally delivered content that exists through all of the educational systems. But think of all the conversations we've had with our clients, prospects, fintech providers, banks, just really good conversations. There's a massive amount of learning that occurs in through those type of situations that you don't get. I mean, you can get your credits and things from going to webinars or local AFP events, and you should do those things. But there's something for this large gathering of people where you can connect with so many people and have these side conversations that add something to your thinking, change how you might approach something, trigger a response or an initiative at your firm. Those are all things that, how do you put those into play when you say come to an event where people are talking about this stuff? It's the values there. When you come there, you're like, yeah, this is what we've been missing for a couple of years. So you're just not having a large gathering like when we had virtual. Virtual is, you can only go so far with virtual. The physical it's demonstrably superior in a number of ways. Yes, you have to travel. That's the challenge. You have to physically move to get somewhere. And certainly you'll learn how to put a lot more steps on here than clicking from one room to another.
So I'd like to move to practitioners. It's good to see a fair number of practitioners here. Last year in DC, it seemed like there was definitely more providers than practitioners. And I see the flip side this year. More practitioners are around. They're coming out. They're talking to folks. It's a real good sign. So what are clients or prospective clients telling you in terms of what their needs are?
Yes, I would just expand one of the comments I said earlier about, this concept of an end-to-end view is something we're hearing regularly. How do I make it, because every time there's not an end-to-end view, there's a broken, disrupted process. What we call defects. Every defect has massive cost in time, and that tends to be one of the most expensive, most valuable assets of an organization. It also prohibits and inhibits growth and scaling, but it also has a financial impact in terms of cash flow. So that's a key item. But a lot of technology conversations we're in transition, and we're in a heavy transition of technology. What do I need to do? How do I need to think about all of my actions that move me towards what the future state will be, what the most modern technology is, so that I'm not having to rebuild in 3, 5, and 10 years. Now, there's always going to be some of that, but if they're thinking about that in terms of payments, in terms of managing and leveraging this explosion of data, it's interesting to see, you're talking to people and they're like, now I get it. I got to connect to all my banks. I need to pull in data from 12 different sources. So I need to leverage, big data, databases, the providers, technology. They're thinking farther ahead. I think the other thing is every group seems to be bringing the technology team with the treasury team. They're not necessarily that they're all embedded. Some are embedded. Some have reporting relationships. But they're bringing the full team together, and they're all learning, about the business and about the technology together, which is really, really exceptional. Has always been needful, but has been much rarer in the past than it is this time.
That's a great comment because I've seen that as well, and that's definitely something that is a new trend. And so when we think about past, what has differed this time or where we're at today versus what you've seen in the past? You just gave a great example. IT is embedded or part of the team when it comes here to AFP. That's relatively new. That's great to see because this is a technology conference when you look at it at the end of the day. That's what a lot of the providers and vendors are selling or providing to the members here at the AFP. What are some of those differences, the nuances that you're seeing this year compared to past?
There's a number of new technology providers. We expect that every year. There's going to be new technology providers that they've gotten to the point where they're past the quiet period. They now have a booth that they can show and explain what they're doing. And we see that, again, you walk on the floor. The one challenge I see, there's not a lot of those. There's some and they're significant. But when I go back pre-COVID, it seemed to me that there was 80 or 100 of these booths, these 10 by 10 booths, largely of, relatively new technology providers who are making a foray, getting in front of people. In COVID, there was like almost none. It's come back a bit there. That's an area I want to see expand as well, that there, another 50 or so of these type of tech firms come and make their case on the floor and share what's going on. I think to your point about how is that different from the past? That's one area that I think COVID has harmed, just like it harmed us. We're not getting together. Now we're getting together. I'm really hoping that bounces back far more fully. That's less than half the way back from like the population, like you said. We're more at parity with practitioners and everybody who's trying to sell to practitioners versus, 3 people chasing one or 2 chasing one. Now it's much easier. That's part of the answer to your question. But what else are they telling about our needs? They're valuing their bank relationships heavily. I still hear them talking to their banks to get massive amounts of advice. And some are doing really good at that. And some bankers are repeating what they said 5 years and 10 years ago and not updating. So most of them are keeping up on data and trends. Some are not. And it seems like the corporate treasurers, ATs, are quickly discerning who's adding significant value and who's not. Really, every banker, every treasury sales executive needs to be adding value. They talk to so many people, they need to do that. And that's not being consistent. That's a key relationship differentiator.
For those banks that aren't paying attention, they're going to need to pay attention soon, or they're going to get left behind. Thinking about some of these key areas that practitioners are thinking of, what are you advising to your existing clients or prospective clients in terms of what they should focus on?
That's a deep question, right? What are the key areas that we should be telling people to focus on? Well, it will sound like a little bit of a repeat. On the technology front, you have to stay current with what's going on. You don't have to be a master of all the new technology, of all the new regulations, of everything else that's coming down the pike from a structural perspective. But you need to be aware of those things. So if you think of concentric circles, there's items and activities that are common and standard that exist today that everyone has to know. There's the items that are going to impact you. They're starting to impact organizations. They're going to impact you. Let's say regulations coming in shortly about foreign bank account reporting. Those things are going to impact organizations in the very near term. Most companies, most treasury professionals are really focused on those because it's immediate, it's extensive. But the broader identification zone of what's coming down the pike, what's happening with technology, what are banks doing with structures they offer, services that they provide. Technology providers, are doing many, many different things. Staying alert to what's going on. The circle of evaluation, identification zone has to extend out quite a bit more. And so in smaller organizations, that's difficult because you have 1 or 2 people. How do you stay current on that? Well, you've got to go to the exhibit hall. You have to talk with people who are smart. So bankers, consultants, they're smart because they see a lot and talk to a lot of people. You want to take advantage of those people who have a network of ideas in their heads because they're continual learners or they're continual talkers and engagers in that space. That's a key activity for practitioners. Make sure you're doing that. And some of the phrases, divide and conquer. 2 companies that we're doing work with have brought, they're examples of, they bring their IT team, multiple treasury people. They're looking at what they want to learn as an organization, and they're dividing themselves up because they're like, there's 3 sessions. We need to know about this. They go out there and they don't just keep it in their heads. They debrief and focus together. So that's the kind of behavior that is team-oriented behavior, that's institutional, knowledge-oriented, that anybody who has that luxury of being able to bring staff can and should do.
It's really encouraging to see organizations doing that, especially ones that we have relationships with. Really says that they're looking to do the right things. They're looking to learn as they go along. Because there's a certain section of things that they just don't know because they've been doing something for the same way for 2 decades. It's a common theme for some organizations out there. When you see your clients coming to an event like this and they're bringing the team and they're dividing and conquering, that's just encouragement for us. It helps us or positions us to help them to be more successful in what they're trying to accomplish. Because they get more buy-in, they get more knowledge, they understand the process better, they adopt it quicker. I just think that's a huge win for practitioners. So as we come off practitioners, I'd like to talk about The flip side, the providers. We have a number of providers here. You just look down on the floor back here. There's quite a few vendors this year. That's great to see. Last year it was pretty thin. This year, better attended on the provider side as well. So it's great to see that. Do you see any changes in what providers need in order to succeed in the treasury arena?
Yeah, I'm not sure there's a lot of changes in there. It's probably more of the same on the continuing path. You see a number of vendors who are here who are well committed. They bring a large team. They've prepared. They're not just entertaining, they're educating, their current clientele, their current customers, as well as they're reaching out to prospects. They're educating, they're building awareness, they're helping make those connections. That's one general thing that is vital. So they're committed to the industry and they're committed to being here where most of these conversations are taking place. That's one aspect. I think the other is if they're service providers, technology providers, they need to not just have, here's our roadmap of feature functionality. That has to be done. That should be, it's not quite table stakes, but it should be table stakes where that's really clear what they're doing functionality wise. But there also has to be more explanation of where they're going, what's their roadmap technologically, what technology is changing, how will that impact what they're doing, how are they addressing scalability, the power of compute, natural language search, all of those items that are impacting every other area of tech, that has to be part of the discussion. So we see that the risk providers, the FX entities, the treasury management systems, the payment hubs, the treasury aggregators, and we certainly see that with the move in ERP providers to the cloud, Oracle Cloud, SAP, S/4HANA, the movement to more or less cloud native type of technology is shifting. And so those discussions need to happen. How do we continue to, as a vendor, as a provider, how do we continue to make our offering to grow in value each month, each quarter, each year, as opposed to it's plateauing and it's declining. It has to be an asset that increases in value. There needs to be more discussion and explanation of how that works. The other thing that I would say is there's this balance between explaining what needs to be done today, next year, the real practical matters of making things work, and this vision of the future. You can't explain 30 years out in the future, but there needs to be some link to the 5 to 7 year horizon. What are you doing, thinking, and planning? And then there has to be the practical side, because people can't say, I'm going to go with you because of, what you've promised to do in 5 or 10 years. Yeah. There's the practical nature of what's immediately out there, but also this eye to the future. Just like I was talking about the concentric circles of what's happening now and what's on the forefront. Vendors need to do that same type of thing. And they need to explain why and have those discussions with their clients and prospects.
Yeah, that's really spot on, Craig. So when we think about the providers, do you see consolidation of tech firms or a faster pace of new entrants over the next 5 years?
I certainly think on the private equity side, there's a huge amount of liquidity sloshing around that needs to be put to use, and they will put it to use. But they're careful. I mean, they review organizations. They look at growth trends, where people spend. They're looking to find where they can put together companies that have particular synergies or will have outsized growth, or they can leverage their expertise or their ability to expand the market, upscale their sales process. Because there's that liquidity, because there's a number of areas in treasury and finance that are growing far faster than the economy has been growing, and probably certainly faster than the economy is expected to grow in 2023. I think there's going to be more consolidation. I think that will outstrip the number of companies that be new entrants, because there's so much cash right now. I think it'll be fairly even. There's always this onslaught of new entrants, but I think I'm going to give it a little edge to the acquisition spree for the very short term.
Yeah, it kind of seems that way, at least in the near term. So these are great comments. The next thing I wanted to move on, which seems to be a theme here at AFP, is payments. We talked about trends earlier. This year's AFP has a number of presentations on payments, seems to be a focus on payments. So this is clearly taking the spotlight. What do you think is driving this?
There's so much change in payments now. I think it's easy to say there's never been more change in X area than in the past. And that may be true for most areas. Payments hasn't changed tremendously, compared to some other areas for a long time. Even in the U.S., there's new payment rails hadn't come out in, 30, 40 years. Now there's new payment rails, multiple new payment rails coming in the U.S., in different areas of Europe, really across the globe. That's changing a lot because it's brand new. It's not just a different window or a little bit more information. Mm-hmm. It's new information, new methods of communicating. And payments are changing from we pass information and we pass data. It's non-transparent and eventually it shows up in the other area, to we're looking at the whole life cycle. And places like Swift and other companies, like ECS, Fin, whatever, think about a payment platform as opposed to a series of messages that move. And so when we think about how that changes the activity, it's not like 50 handoffs. Something gets stuck partway through. It goes back to the beginning. It has to start over. It's everyone's looking at the same, I'll call it the same version of the truth, the same instance. And whether you interact over that via an historical method of connection like SFTP or an API or some other method, you're all interacting over the same information. And so that what gets lost in the telephone game of all these conversations, the telephone game with multiple languages now becomes a dialogue that everyone's communicating in the way and the time and the language that they're choosing, and they're all seeing the same information. So that's one big part, I think, what's happening. The other is we've been at some sessions. We've had a lot of conversations, Paul, on APIs and embedded treasury, embedded payments. That is a massive trend. It's not just a talking trend. It's happening. We see it happening in Europe faster than we see it in the U.S., much to those who have pride in U.S. technology growth, and it's behind, and it's following and playing catch up in some of these areas. So there's a lot on payment front, from APIs to embedded payments to the rapid rise of payments, rapid growth of payments. There's a lot here on payments.
Really appreciate the comments today. We're at the end of our time. Look forward to seeing what's going to happen over the next few years in Treasury. There's a lot of exciting things out there, and we'll provide an update next year.
You've reached the end of another episode of the Treasury Update podcast. Be sure to follow Strategic Treasurer on LinkedIn. Just search for Strategic Treasurer. This podcast is provided for informational purposes only, and statements made by Strategic Treasurer LLC on this podcast are not intended as legal, business, consulting, or tax advice. For more information, visit and bookmark strategictreasurer.com.